Shivaya. Om Namo Shivaya. Om.
Namaste. I am so blissed out by Śiva Purāṇa. I can't express how wonderful it is. And that's why I want to do these videos, even though some people may find it a little tedious to read through all the chapters and then analyze it. I'm having a blast. So I'm going to continue this because it's just so much fun and I'm getting blissed out. So let's take a look at chapters 3 and 4 of the Māhātmyam. In chapter 3, Shaunaka says to Sutta, basically, that was a really great story about Devaraj. Now, can you tell me another one? And so he tells the story of Cañculā. Now, the name Cañculā is interesting in Sanskrit. It could be a corruption of Cañculā, which is a name of Lakshmi. And it means someone who's unsteady. Because Lakshmi, meaning wealth, is always coming and going, never remaining in one place for very long. Or at least that's her nature. When people try to hold on to Lakshmi, they get into all kinds of trouble. So this woman is unsteady by nature. And also Cañculā, with a long A at the end, can mean a teacher. So basically this story is to instruct us about the consequences of being unsteady. How is she unsteady? Well, she's married to this guy, Binduga. And in Sanskrit, Bindu can mean any woman. And you see often that the women in India will wear this dot, which is called a bindu. And of course it has a deeper spiritual meaning, but I don't think that's applicable here. Because ga, as a suffix, means one who likes to have sexual enjoyment with. So basically this guy is willing to have sexual enjoyment with any woman. And so this is, of course, a violation of morality. Now, this is where things get a little serious because people, modern people who hear this story will think, well, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with having sex with other people's wives or with lovers or paramours? Because the morality today has become so degenerate that people think it's perfectly normal, it's just okay. And recently, you know, when I lived in Tiruvannamalai, once I was talking with the lady who owned the house where I was staying, and she was telling me, you know, all these neighbors of mine, they put on a pious front, but actually they're all having affairs like rabbits, you know, with each other's wives and husbands. And I said, well, what's the point? You know, if they're going to be so loose, why don't they just come out front and do it? And he said, oh no, they have to maintain the image of propriety. And so that's what's going on here. Cañculā, although she has the good fortune of being born in a brāhmaṇa family, did not have Brahminical values or morals at all. And especially her husband. I mean, this guy takes on a lover and completely ignores his wife. See, so the real standard of morality, and the one that people ignore today, probably more than any other, is to remain faithful to one's married mate. Now, in Kali Yuga, it's become normal to be infidelitas, but it's not right. It's never right. And the reason is that because one is breaking one's promise. One's word should be held sacred. And when you promise fidelity at the time of marriage, you should stick to that your whole life. I looked my whole life I searched high and low for an appropriate mate. I couldn't find one. I could not find one. They were all addicted to this Kali Yuga moral standard or immoral standard of taking anybody for a lover just on a whim. And I was married twice and had other relationships too. And they were all unfaithful to me, every single one of them. And so I had to reject them. So, this is Kali Yuga. This is going on. Just because it's a majority view doesn't make it right. And so she got in a lot of trouble. And her whole life was basically wasted, her whole youthful life, because she didn't do any divine service. She didn't do any karma yoga, bhakti yoga, what to speak of meditation. Because the mind is always disturbed. See? So in the next chapter, chapter 4, what happens is that by chance, she goes to a religious festival, a holy place, a spiritual center, sanctified by long practice of yoga and puja and so on. And just out of association with her relatives, she took bath in a holy lake, a holy tank. And I'm not thinking that this is for my benefit or anything like that. It's just a customary thing to do. Happens all the time in India. And then in the temple, she happened to hear a portion of Śiva Purāṇa. And Śiva Purāṇa, in I think it's the third part, there's extensive descriptions of hell. All the different hells, the different punishments there, and how they are given to people who commit certain sins and so on. And she happened to hear that a woman who commits adultery is forced to have a red-hot iron inserted in her vaginal passage. And she, with the purification due to the bath in the holy lake, she took this very seriously and she became terrified. Oh my God, what if this happens to me? How will I deal with it? And so after the talk, she approached the brāhmaṇa who's giving the talk. Now this is a real brāhmaṇa. This is someone who does sadhana and meditation and who knows the scriptures and who abides by them. And so he lectured her, instructed her on the process of penance. This is how you overcome the bad karma from sinful actions. This is how you avoid sinful reactions like having to go to hell or taking birth in the animal kingdom or taking birth with a deformed or crippled body or something like this, or tremendous suffering due to diseases and so on. You have to sincerely regret and atone for the things you've done wrong in your life. Otherwise, you have to face the judgment of God at the time of death. Yamaraj is completely fair and unbiased, but he's also severe and strict in his interpretation of the scriptures. So, in other words, as you do, so shall be done unto you. So if you violate the moral codes, you have to suffer. I mean, just from an ordinary psychological point of view, if one is in a relationship where one's mate thinks, oh, it's okay to be casually unfaithful or infidelitous, you're going to be in some emotional anxiety. You're going to have some emotional insecurity in that relationship. That is suffering. And from a broader perspective, as soon as we get involved in pursuing the objects of the senses, we suffer. Desire leads to suffering, like fire leads to smoke. It's just that direct and simple. Why? Because all these objects of the senses are imperfect. And even if we attain them, we always find there's some fault. Isn't it? It's never just right. There's always some problem, some defect. And the greatest defect is that even if, let's say, we acquire the most perfect object of our desire, it's temporary. So I think it's a very appropriate when Cañculā says to the Brahmin that I committed so many sins in the pursuit of evanescent material pleasures. Evanescent means evaporating, fading away, disappearing, temporary. Because even if we enjoy something very much, that doesn't satisfy the desire. We want more, isn't it? You can't just eat one, the commercial says. If it tastes really good, you're going to want more. So actually, desires are never satisfied. They only lead to more desires and more desires. The only way to satisfy desire is to just stop it. Just drop it. Let it go. Right from the beginning, knowing that this is going to be a source of suffering. Even if I'm successful in attaining my desire, it's going to be taken away by time or death. And one should be cognizant of death. One should realize that death is coming, even if one is in the stage of youth, where one is tempted to think, oh yeah, there's plenty of time. I can always do yoga and sadhana when I'm old. It doesn't work that way. Because the habits that you develop early in life are the ones that stay with you, that stick with you, even in old age. There's a saying in India, a saint in truth is a saint in youth. So if one develops habits such as reading the scriptures, doing puja, chanting mantras, living a clean vegetarian life, and controlling one's sex desire, and so on like that, then at the end of life, one finds it easy, second nature, to continue all these things and attain the actual object of human life, which is salvation, liberation, moksha. So this is the whole point of human life, to develop pious regard for God and to adhere to the rules in the scriptures. Not just because they're rules and one should follow them like some dry procedure. No. Because one should realize that if I don't, I'm going to suffer. And in proportion to the amount and the duration of my violating the moral principles of the scriptures, that is going to be the result, the consequences of my actions. So Cañculā was very, very upset on hearing what would happen to her as a result of her immoral life. And because she took it very seriously, she repented. Not only did she completely change her lifestyle, but she stayed in a holy place, continued to take a bath in sacred waters, and continued to hear Śiva Purāṇa from a realized soul, a perfect brāhmaṇa, which are rare these days, very rare. But if you can find one, you should stick to him like glue and serve him. So she was staying in a holy place, doing purification, taking bath in the holy lake and like that, hearing from a realized soul, serving him, and performing meditation and japa and all these spiritual activities. So at the end of her long life, what happened? She left her body, first of all, without any difficulty, without pain and suffering. Easy death. And this is the first Well, only the first benediction. Then Shiva sent an aerial chariot to pick her up and bring her to his abode. And Shiva and Shakti received her warmly, with compassion, and made her part of their retinue. And so the story's not over yet, because she also, in the next chapter, has compassion on her fallen husband. So we'll get to that in the next episodes. Aum Tat Sat. Aum Shakti Aum. Om Namah Shivaya.